want this recorded and watching after the fact for sure. But want to welcome everyone on a cold, blustery Saskatchewan night, at least down south here for sure, to another SGI Drive for Gold webinar. And tonight, extremely pleased to welcome a gem in the world of media and sports media. And to all our benefit, a lover of the great sport of curling, which is just fantastic. Devin Heuroux is with us, and Devin reports for CBC News and Sports, currently based in Toronto, and had been in Calgary and then Saskatoon hometown. Is that right, or is it close to hometown? Or
Saskatoon, born and raised, but I can see you sort of questioning where I've been. I do the same thing. So.
Well, I was gonna. My next one was. So, in the past calendar year, have you been based more in Toronto or more elsewhere in the last 6-8 months or so?
Yeah, getting back to that lifestyle of being on the road more than I am at home, and I'm very happy about that.
Right on, for sure. So. Yeah, just thanks for your time, obviously. Bunch of questions and a bunch of things that I think, we as athletes, when we're kind of in the moment or doing our thing or whatnot, I think a lot of things that I want to bring to light that, I know I was guilty of and that we just don't, maybe think about it the same way as coming from the other angle. And obviously having you here is going to be great to get some insight in that. And I'll provide some of my own as well. But want to first, though, let you kind of expand on that and just kind of let us know how you got your start in this career, and then also kind of why curling. What sparked this interest in the curling bit?
Awesome. Pat, thank you for the opportunity. Hello to all of you guys. Of course, you can see I'm joined by my plants here, which keep me grounded and keep me company. Yeah, it's awesome to be joining you. And of course, I was born and raised in Saskatoon. And the reason I fell in love with the Olympics and with curling has everything to do with the 1998 games and Sandra Schmirler. I was so captivated by the team. I was so captivated that over the fact that there were 4 women from Saskatchewan that felt like our next door neighbors that went out there in the world and kicked ass and won gold. And it kind of, for the first time in my life, signaled to me that we could be from Saskatchewan, that we could leave our borders, we could go out there in the rest of the world, and we could be great. And, I think we're going to talk a little bit about Tokyo, not too much, but the fact that I got to go to Japan back, sort of where it all started in Nagano, Japan, and have this full circle moment. And Nagano is only about 2 hours away from Tokyo, was really, really cool for me. I knew I was never going to be a good enough athlete to ever make it to the Olympics. So I figured if you can't beat them, join them and write about them and tell stories about them. So was captivated by the roaring game in 1998 and Sandra Schmirler. Then did some curling of my own. My claim to fame is 2 high school curling championships in Saskatoon as a third. And I just really love the game. I love everything that the game represents. To me, it's so much more than a game. It's a community, it's a family. And I get to see that in my reporting today. And of course, in the work I get to do with my partner in crime, and of course, one of the best curlers ever, Colleen Jones. So it really is truly a family. I think that, and part of the reason why I really wanted to make time for this today was because I think that curlers are perhaps the most accessible athletes in the world. And as a reporter, I don't take that lightly. It makes my job really, really rewarding and really easy. And I think in turn, the curlers and the fans benefit greatly from that. So 2004, my love for curling hit a different gear. And if you remember that Brier final in Saskatoon, I was a CBC intern 17 years ago. That was my first brush at reporting on curling. And I just believed that every curling game was as dramatic as the Dacey Furby final. They're not, but I was hooked. And away we go 17 years later. I'm our lead curling reporter and headed back to Saskatoon where it all began. So that's a little bit of a summary and a full circle summary, no doubt.
Nice, good game to start with, that's for sure, or
No kidding.
rider to start with, absolutely. So, yeah, and since there's been some great events in Saskatoon, and obviously another one coming up right around the corner, which is we're all kind of looking forward to, absolutely.
Right.
So, gang, here's how tonight's gonna go. Obviously, we're gonna do reverse roles. So normally I'm not the one asking the questions, and normally I'm the one trying to fumble through answering them. So tonight we're gonna grade Devin on his answers and taking marks off for things such as I didn't have my A game tonight, or I'm taking it a question at a time, those types of things. So we'll watch out for those. But
Gross. Gross.
in all seriousness, no, I'll give the first tip, and then the rest will be coming from him tonight. And the first one I want to give is to people to if you enjoy stories in sports, if you enjoy kind of backstories in sports or the character moments or the stories within the stories, just make sure you give Devin either a follow or a like, or whatever you do, whatever all the social media platforms you do or call it. I think I obviously we had run across each other, Devin, but before the Olympics, actually, I was fortunate enough to kind of click follow and just lovely kind of updates and things. And I mean, if you're busy and but want to know and kind of want good stuff and interesting stuff and the kind of, if you're a sucker like me, kind of those cool stories. Yeah, just that's my first and probably best tip I can give everyone here tonight is to do that for sure. So right into it. First question that we're going to ask you here is, what impact does media have on sport? And interested in that just because we want to hear kind of the slant coming from you on that.
Slant. There's always a slant. I don't have a slant. That's funny. We talked about some of these questions, Pat, and I didn't want to think about them too much because I wanted this to be as authentic as possible. And I think you're going to hear that theme of authenticity a lot tonight, because I think that's the richness of any interview. But I know before everybody came on, you and I were talking, and I had mentioned that I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. I think it's poignant for the moment right now, because in a way I'm worried about sports journalism and the landscape that we find ourselves in, specifically in the midst of and the wake of, and as we get out of this pandemic, because I think what we've seen is the Zoom life. And I am so sick and tired of these virtual boxes and these virtual interviews, because to me, my currency is that proximity is power. And when you talk about the richness of storytelling, and thank you for the kind words, the richness of those stories come in being able to spend time with the athletes. I haven't been able to spend time with the athletes in the way that I've wanted to. And so when I think and reflect about the role sports media has on the athlete and the well-being of an athlete, and we can get into the whole other side of that with mental health and whether or not you do interviews or whether you don't. Here's what I'll say. I think that more than ever, it is incumbent upon the journalist and the athlete to find a middle ground and to strike a balance in realizing that it is kind of mutually beneficial to be working together. And I know for so long as journalists, from my perspective, we've been told that there needs to be this barrier between you and the person you're interviewing. I've never done it that way. Some people, old school journalists, don't like my reporting because of that. But I believe that it is the way we need to move forward, because I think there's a level of connectivity and vulnerability that exists when you do that. It doesn't need to be bias. It doesn't need to be subjective. It doesn't need to be editorial. But I'm a human being that has had human experiences that approaches every story. And you're a human being and an athlete who comes in with a whole other thing. I think more than ever, athletes are understanding their privileged position and the power of their voice. And I think when you add that all together, I think media plays a massively important role in the success and the well-being of an athlete. And fascinatingly enough, I was in Calgary a couple of weeks ago spending days upon days with our women's hockey team and our speed skaters. And at the end of almost every interview, I had the athletes say to me, well, I feel like I should be paying you because this in a way felt like a therapy session. And that's what I would want from my reporting, is that an athlete would be self-reflective, that would feel comfortable and open enough. And I think what happens is it allows the athlete to really step into their power and show up fully. And I think good sports journalism can do that. And in turn, I'm going to write a hell of a story. So I think when we talk about the impact of sports journalism, I think it can do a lot of things, but more than anything, I think it can empower the athlete to share their truth and to be reflective, and it can arm the reporter with the words needed to tell a great story.
Right on. And all the while, when you get to that point in doing so, I'm assuming has massive benefits from the athlete's perspective too, right? Not just whether it's getting something off their chest or whatever, but also, I mean, in ways of fan base or all sorts of things, right? Like all sorts of things that we might not even think of that are potentially there. How you want to be, how you want to be viewed, like all of it basically, right? And you have that say in doing so as an athlete.
I love that you said that, because the thing that triggered in me, and I'm really glad we're going to get to this point. Here's the thing about curling in particular. Canadians believe that they know curlers as if they are their best friends or their next door neighbor because of the accessibility we have to curlers. They're mic'd up. We hear you guys talking all of the time. We hear the inflection and the emotion in your voice. What other sport in the world do you literally have a front row seat to hear what the athletes are thinking every second? So you've got to think about that. Think about the way the audience is interpreting everything you say on that broadcast. And then how do you want to present yourself in those post-game scrums? Because I'll tell you what, for a long time, a lot of the really fierce competitive women in this sport were categorized as, you can come up with whatever names you want to come up, but that's the way people were interpreting it. Of course, I want to break down those barriers and do that work. But I think, when you're able to sort of present yourself in an authentic way, knowing that the audience is literally making their mind about who you are because they're watching you all the time and hearing what you say, you are the master of your own destiny when you choose to share what you choose. And I'll tell you what, there've been a lot of times when I've covered curling bonspiels, when I know the outcome of an event before the game is played just by what the athlete has shared with me in a scrum and in our interview. I know exactly where you are psychologically. I know how you're going to throw the next game. And I can tell you you're about to lose just by how you hold yourself in an interview. I should be betting on these games.
Well, yeah, no, I don't doubt that at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can, but people can now too. That's the other thing. But no, for sure. Hey, so from an athlete's perspective, but obviously with your opinion in mind as in your position, what are the keys then, would you say, to giving a good interview, and like what qualities, what keys and what qualities do you want to hear?
I'm going to use two examples, real life examples, because I think they would be okay with me using this, because I've done many, many interviews with Brad Jacobs and Brad Gushue. These two men, I would say at the beginning of their careers, were hot-headed, had a swagger. They did a lot of winning early in their careers. And then they've lost, and they've had some tough losses. But to have a front row seat in the evolution of Brad Jacobs and Brad Gushue, from how they conducted themselves in scrums and interviews after losses and after victories early in their career, to where they've evolved to now, has been one of the great things in my career to watch. Because, obviously there's media training that goes on with Curling Canada, and I have feelings about that, because I think that it can be useful at times, but I also think it can get into the head of the athlete to not feel like you can say anything. And I would never want an athlete to be literally thinking about what they have to say when they're in an interview. I have an issue with that. Like, if you just lost a big game, if you say, great team effort, 110%, like, it's a waste of all of our time, right?
Yeah.
You just lost the game. And guess what? I'm never going to know what it's like to lose a Brier championship, but I know what loss is in my life. The relatable thing about sport is that we all know what it's like to be heartbroken, and we all know what it's like to experience joy. So don't be afraid to lean into that. It's okay to show that in front of a reporter. Sure, you might have issues with some reporters. Sure, you might not trust that they're going to capture the essence. That's never going to change, and that's always going to happen. That's always going to be there. But there are also going to be reporters, I would hope, like myself, that is going to capture the essence of the emotion in that moment. So generally, I would say what makes a great interview is leaning into the vulnerability and the emotion of the moment. And I think Brad Gushue and Brad Jacobs have done that. Some of the more compelling moments I've seen with Brad Jacobs is him talking about his journey through sports psychology, mental health, having a sports psych, talking about, what they needed to do to get to the next level of their game. I was in absolute awe at the Brier in Brandon at a scrum he gave after a tough loss, just literally talking about the perspective of life and the perspective of curling. And I like Brad Jacobs, but that took it to a different level, because I just went, wow, in front of our eyes, you are standing in your power and you are sharing your truth about what this loss means in your life and what it means in your career. And I'm not going to say that it influences how much effort I put into my story, but if you're hearing what I'm saying, it makes me want to honor the athlete that much more when they're willing to be that brave and that courageous in a moment that I know isn't easy. There aren't going to be, softball, cushy, easy interviews in sport. But I think the more you're able to just lean into it and know that there's a lot of people that have done this before you, and there will be people to continue to do this after you, and you're not alone in whatever you're feeling in that moment, I think the interview is also going to be a lot easier, Pat. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. Good stuff. So you answered beautifully kind of the do's and what you're looking for. One question that just kind of came to my mind as you were talking about that, then, as athletes, from the athlete perspective, do we have to get to know who we're talking to? Is it beneficial, or should we just be striving for the same degree of reality with everyone, and knowing that it may come out different, I guess?
it's a great question. And at the end of the day, I think you have to gauge your level of comfort with the reporter you're talking to. I've talked to so many athletes over my career who say, I wasn't really willing to get to that level with that reporter. And honestly, if that's what you have to do to protect yourself in that moment and get through the interview and give what you got to give in that moment, I say absolutely lean into that as well, because there are people out there, there are reporters out there who aren't always going to want to capture the essence of what you're sharing. And, it's funny because I've been doing a lot of podcasts and on the other end of people's questions. So I've been feeling it a little more about what that feels like. And there have been moments, Pat, where I have to check myself and I have to go, wait a second, what would this look like in the paper? What is this going to sound like over the radio? What is this going to look like a clip playing over and over on TV? So as a don't give anything that's going to go viral and be that 10-second out of context clip. Always be aware and in control of the words you're using, because it's going to look a hell of a lot worse on paper. Let me just say that.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? Any other, obvious don'ts, whether it be through an interview, paper, or social media for that matter?
My number one rule for social media is if you wouldn't broadcast it, if you wouldn't say it out loud, don't tweet it. Like, if you think that social media is this little enclave where nobody's really watching, you're wrong. So the other thing I do, because, I'm not afraid to dive into controversial topics, I actually have to do a little bit of an emotional check-in with myself to see what my level of sensitivity is on any given day. If you've just had a really hard day in competition and people are doing whatever they're doing, because the haters are always going to hate. If I showed you my inboxes, you'd be appalled. Do you really want to go on there and get into a Twitter war? Do you really want to delve into a back and forth? Do you really want to drop a bomb tweet when you're feeling a little raw on a rough day? That would be my advice. I would never want to censor anybody because I'm 100% against censorship. So I don't have a lot of don'ts in an interview. I think whatever you feel is comfortable for you, do it. But what I would say is just make sure you're emotionally in a space to handle whatever you're going to share in the interview and on social media, because there are some days where I know I'm extra sensitive. And if I go on Twitter and I start getting into a controversial topic, I'm going to take that way more personally than I should. So that would be my advice for that.
Right on. Yeah, I think that's good. That's very interesting you say that, because I think, again, that's one of those things I don't know that I don't know that a lot of people would think of that even, right? And it's so easy, especially with the social media platform being at your disposal at any point in time. I mean, that's even more important, I would say, for sure.
And let me just jump in to finish the thought. It's funny because when you are raw and sensitive and just lost, the first thing you probably want to do is blow it all up.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful with that.
For sure. Okay. Going strong. This is great. Just a reminder, and we all know this by now, but if you do have any questions, anyone does, feel free to type that in the chat, and we'll attack that at the end here for sure. So, going right along here. So, is there a fine line where, being too truthful maybe is being too truthful, if you will? So, I'll give you an example. I was playing in the provincials a long time ago, and this was one of those. It was probably after a loss too, I'm sure. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it was or whatnot. And kind of got to talking about the ice, and I think I made mention of, well, the ice is pretty tricky, and we tried to cope and manage the best we could, and so on and so forth, and really not thinking of the possible repercussions of that getting into the paper the next day, right? And sure enough, and of course looked bad, and away we go. And the reason I bring that up, there's only a couple times I've had little blips or instances or whatnot that I certainly regretted after the fact. But is there a point of being too truthful in an interview?
I think so, and I think your example points that out, because let me tell you, when media are covering a bond spill, if we're at a Brier, there are essentially 10 days of coverage. When we get to the middle of the draw, we're looking for stories, and we're looking for Pat Simmons to say that the ice isn't up to standard. Because boy, that is a sexy headline, isn't it, Pat? Simmons question ice conditions, right? So I would say yes. Because here's what you don't want. You don't want your audience to think you're making excuses for poor play. Mm-hmm. So if you're having issues with your teammates, I'm probably going to see that.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to start asking questions about that. And if you start being a little bit too honest about what might be going on within your team dynamic, that gives me ammunition to write a story.
Right. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, I was thinking I was thinking at the time, I do remember this actually, even though it was a long time ago, I do remember thinking at the time, I didn't really want to go there, but I thought I was actually being very generous with that comment, right? But it doesn't matter, of course. So there's a good example of, think before you say, and just, know what the repercussions are after the fact, and who knows how that'll be taken and forwarded on or whatnot. Obviously you don't know, right?
Always think about your audience. And that's one thing I've had to learn throughout my career now that I have quite a following on Twitter. It's funny, Pat, because I'm still in the mindset of like this young cub journalist in Saskatoon that has 2,000 followers on Twitter. And I have more followers now, and I have a big audience, and I have to be responsible with my words. And I would say the same with the athletes. Think about your audience, think about how they might interpret what you're saying, and use that as your North Star to what you want to share.
For sure. Awesome. Okay. So if you are, and I'll comment about this about myself, but if you're dry like me and give kind of those guarded or dry interviews typically, and that's just your personality, is that okay? Or is this something that should be further practiced? And, or if that's the case, how do you go about doing that? How do we get better at the athlete side of talking to you or whomever?
There are some curlers I know who are very dry, dry. We'll use dry interviews.
Sure.
Listen, you can't be who you're not. You can't be who you're not. And it's funny you say that, because I've gotten to the point where I know I'm not going to get quotes. I just know that.
Yeah.
So there are curlers coming to my mind immediately.
We can almost see it in the bubble on over top of your head there.
Some very high profile curlers. I have to get creative about the stories I want to tell. And to be quite frank, I think the onus falls on the journalist. If you know that this is what you're going to get throughout a curler's career, I don't want you going out there, trying to give me a little bit of extra, or even thinking about that, because the last thing you want to do in the middle of a Olympic curling trials is be thinking about, boy, these journalists, I'm going to turn it on for them this week. That's not happening. I think a good journalist knows exactly what they're walking into. And let me tell you, I've sat on the media bench with reporters who have never covered curling a day in their life, thinking they're going in there to get the best interview of their life and get all this information, only to come back after the scrum and go, oh, what do I do with this? So there is a way for a journalist to tell a compelling story. And I'm at the point in my career where I know that my writing and my supporting evidence and my narrative around how that curler made it to the Olympics and is looking to redeem their Olympic experience, those sorts of things.
For sure.
Without naming anyone.
100%. So are there written or unwritten rights on both sides with respect to requests in general? So I guess what I'm getting at there is it okay? Is it okay to say no, given certain circumstances, or how best to handle? And I can give you an example. This is another one I can give you a little bit of an example to, and then I'll let you go here. So first Briar was the year after your first in 2005, Edmonton. And so all excited, we walk in, get there Thursday night, and you kind of, one of my favorite curling moments is walking into Northlands Coliseum at the time it was, right? And we're down on ice level, and you walk in there and you see the enormity of the building and the four sheets out there, and it kind of hits you like, oh, we've made it, kind of thing, right? Like you kind of get that moment, and must have been an email, I guess, that night to come in. I think it must have been Saturday morning. I think we played later on in the day on Saturday, our first game, to come into a local, a radio station or whatever. And it was for 6 a.m. Saturday morning, first day of my Briar. And of course, nervous as all heck and so much going on. And the last thing I need to do is get up at whatever time in the morning and get there, right? So of course that one I said, sorry, can't do it, right? And probably, one of the only times I've ever done that. And felt bad about it, didn't really think it was, and it might just be a situation, the request wasn't realistic anyways.
No.
And just, got a little bit of backlash with that and whatnot. So your thoughts on that? What are the rights or wrongs, I guess, with respect to requests in general and circumstances around them per se?
Well, first of all, that's crazy. And second of all, it was probably a news person making the request who doesn't understand the mental preparation of an athlete. Yeah, absolutely say no to that. What I would say is that as an athlete, I think at a certain point, you do have a little bit of a responsibility and accountability. Um, However, requests like that are straight up no. I would say that if you can find a way to make to appease, maybe you could say, could we do a pre-record? Like that's always an option to do a pre-record interview. Is there a time that works for that? Um, but I'm kind of running up against that. I'll get this is a real life example right now. We're getting ready to host that curling show out of Saskatoon. Listen, I know how pressure packed the Olympic curling trials are. This is an event like no other event a curler will play in. I've texted a few of the athletes to see if they would be willing to go on the show very briefly on the Friday night on our preview show. There was a little bit of me when I made that request that went, I probably don't want to be asking these people, but you know what? I'm going to throw it out there. If they don't text me back, no harm, no foul, because I totally get that this is a night before the biggest competition of their life. So I hope that gives you a little bit perspective into the mindset of me knowing that, yeah, I mean, I want to get you on the show. And I do think that a 5-minute interview from your hotel room the night before you begin is manageable. But at the same time, I'm also so overly respectful of the athlete and what they need to do to be in the right headspace that if they say no, I'm totally cool with that because we have a great relationship and track record. I have heard some pretty interesting stories over the last bit with like media representatives for teams and national sport organizations and whatnot, making it pretty difficult with requests. Here's the one caution I'll throw out there for that. If a journalist is hell-bent on writing a story about you, and you kind of get the sense that they're writing this story, whether or not you do the interview, I would say probably do what you can to do the interview because I've always said, if you want to piss off a journalist and get them to write a bad story about you, don't do the interview because you're not telling us anything. So this journalist is probably going to tell the story they want to tell without doing the interview. So that would be the one caution. It's not great. It's not good journalism. I don't adhere to that style of journalism, but there are many journalists who have the pressures of their newsroom to file something.
Right.
And if you decline the interview, they're writing. And the last thing you want to see is so-and-so declined request for interview.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point because I don't think we think about that side enough too, is the pressure involved, the timing, the timelines, almost sometimes I'm sure almost impossible timelines and so on. Right. So I think that is the huge other side of this is be respectful of that. Right.
Totally.
And put the whole package together and be respectful of that for sure.
I have Colleen Jones in our story meetings literally telling me you're not messaging that curler 2 days in advance because Colleen was this OCD crazy preparer who literally went into a bubble at every event and didn't do anything outside. So she's coming to our shows with the perspective of the athlete. So I'm really learning a lot about the boundaries around that. And I think you always do have the right to say no. I think it gets a little less. I think I have a harder time with a no after a game. I think there's a level of accountability to do an interview, win or lose.
So that's perfect segue because my next question was after a game, whether it be a devastating loss or an emotional victory or success, are you okay with, or what's your opinion on needing a little time before talking versus just basically right out with it kind of thing?
If I told you how many hours I've spent waiting in the bowels of arenas for athletes in locker rooms, taking a moment to gather themselves, I could write a book in all of that time. So I'm overly respectful and appreciative of athletes needing to take their time. However, I do draw the line at you owe us an interview. So
Yeah.
take your time, cool down. I don't want you to say anything you're going to regret, because this is a big moment, obviously, but I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be waiting. Because I can tell you an experience that I had this summer covering a team in the lead up to the Olympics, where people didn't come out after a loss and didn't do interviews. And there was a pack of national journalists that traveled a long way to cover this team and were standing there and didn't get accountability interviews after that loss. And we're talking about professionals. That doesn't go over well. That,
no, for sure.
to me, that doesn't fly. If you're a professional at this level, you got to suck it up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so we'll go right into that, because that's one that I had as well. Is there a difference between amateur sport and professional athletes with respect to what is realistic, or what they should be doing, and at a level of accountability?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think you've got to, like, I went to the Youth Olympics in Lausanne in January 2020. I'm at the Youth Olympics, for gosh sakes. I'm not standing outside of a locker room after the Canadian kids lost a playoff game in heartbreaking fashion to stand there and grill them about what went on. Like, that's just not realistic. I think if you're mic'd up and you're playing under the bright lights and you're in the big show, I think there's a little bit more of an accountability, because that goes back sort of to the first question you asked is, what is a role and how much can sport media? Listen, at the end of the day, we're here to provide profile to you, and I think it has to go a little bit both ways. I can understand needing some time to digest, but I do expect that you face the noise, win or lose.
For sure. So a little different direction. When do you feel athletes or teams should reach out first, like make the first move or be proactive? So I'm thinking of an example, like a team personnel change, or maybe a team announcement or a statement. Where do you see that applicable, and is that something that the journalist side likes, or like for me, I would never do that. I always just kind of waited, and I guess part of it was just maybe part of it was just modesty and thinking, well, I'm not going to create a statement. I mean, what does anyone care about what I have to say or what we're doing or whatever? Probably wrongly to some degree, but where does that fit in? Where's the athlete or team making the first move and doing the reach out, where does that fit into the whole grand scheme of things?
Well, Pat, let me start by saying I appreciated the news release about you coming back and curling. So let me start with that, because that was great. And people obviously really like that. We live in a world where people are on their phones and connected and writing things and surmising and gossiping and coming up with their own conclusions. So that I have many athletes reaching out to me to give me the heads up that they are making personnel changes. We're getting to that time of year where teams are going to be blowing up, and they're, we joke about it, but it's like curling frenzy trade center day, right? And these teams will now literally give me the heads up. Because, I think I have a platform in the curling world. And I think if you sponsorship, fan following, all of those things, if you want to control your narrative, give that to a journalist, so there are many examples where teams made changes. They literally send me the press release a day in advance. We reach an agreement that I'm going to hold that for embargo. I'm going to let the team shoot it out on their social media. But the second they do that, I blast out my story. And it's a very, I think mutually beneficial experience. Yeah. So I would say that is the best course of action. And I would say the best course of action is to reach out to me. I'm kidding. But I think you want to control your narrative. And I think the best way to do that is is by getting ahead of it when it comes to personnel change, whatever you're going through, control the narrative and pick a reporter you trust, because once it's out there, everybody's going to be following, but you've already told the story. So,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say teams, if you've been following, of course, they've got their social media managers and, you know, your content producers more than you've ever been before.
Yeah.
So I can also understand if you want to do it that way as well. I just think a journalist helps you amplify all of that. So
And
I think there's
you control the timing of it, right? Like, because you know, depending on the situation, the team, the statement, you know, there's going to be lots happening after the fact, and so from an athlete standpoint, controlling the timing of that so you're ready for, you know, the potential onslaught of what's to follow. Yeah, I see that as great. You know, I don't see a downside to that ever, right? So.
yeah, that gets back to our whole sort of emotionally and mentally in a good space, right? So
Yeah.
so you've literally had time to sort of digest that and then let it go, and you've done your part, you know?
Right, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned social media. Interested in your thoughts on how ideally that platform should be used from an athlete standpoint, but again, from your opinion in all that you do and see and so on and so forth. And so I guess what, you know, again, maybe not so much do's and don'ts, but what you've seen that's been really, you know, maybe an effective use of social media for teams, maybe for curling teams in general, but just for athletes or teams in you know, that you've seen that you know, has been very, very effective for them in a positive way.
Totally. I mean, first of all, for me, it changed my career. I mean, I started live tweeting curling and it just took right off, right? And so it's in a way been my ticket, my golden ticket in a lot of ways. Specifically to teams, I mean, you look at teams using this effectively. I think Team Botcher's Twitter account is hilarious. You know, you have to be savvy, you have to be funny, you have to keep content fresh. You've got to be updating it all the time. Like, you know, I laugh at people thinking that Twitter is sort of just this passive thing that you're sort of dipping in and out of. You got to keep updating it to stay relevant, right? So it is a commitment. I know a lot of the people operating the accounts behind the scenes, and it's a full-time job. But I also think it's worth it, because I'll tell you, in our CBC sports department, we're literally doing stories off of people's social media posts now. So if you go to Instagram and you have an awesome photo talking about your journey with some text and some quotes built into that, I can literally, so this actually, Pat, I think gets back a little bit to, you know, if a reporter if you can't do an interview, you can say, well, you know what? I've said what I said on social media. Feel free to pull from that. A reporter is lazier than ever. And they are literally going to say, you know, in a tweet posted 6 hours ago, the skip said that and then they can embed the tweet into the story digitally, and you're done. You've taken care of it. So I really believe, you know, I shy away from pushing that too much, because it's hard for me to see the teams being their own story creators. However, I think if you're fun with it and giving us sort of that behind the scenes look at practice, preparation, all of those things, I think you're going to get to a good place, and reporters are going to be very pleased about it.
Yeah, and so kind of as a fan, and obviously I'm a fan as much as anything too as well. The more it's humanized, the better as well, right? I mean, the more of it, because we see there's, I mean, we're very lucky to see a lot of curling on TV, and you know, yes, they're mic'd and we can hear everything, and that side of it's great. But you know, a lot of times we don't see the work that goes in at the home club and or the struggles to overcome and other things that they have to manage and things like that, right? So obviously, you know, there's a few instances there where people will gravitate to that kind of stuff if it's thoughtfully done, right?
And sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. So
full stop. Your sponsor wants to see their logo, videos,
Yep.
That's the biggest thing. So
Absolutely, for sure. So my last thoughts, and then we're going to get to some fun questions for you. But my last thoughts, obviously, what I always thought about media, and I always did enjoy um, whoever I dealt with. And I think that the biggest thing, and I managed to keep this perspective, for the most part, all the way through, and certainly now, even more so, I would think, more than ever. If somebody from the media, a journalist, wants to talk to you. It usually is a sign that things are going in the right direction. Typically, they don't need the time from someone that isn't doing anything or hasn't progressed in a certain way or progressed towards a goal or done anything. So I think that's a good way to think of it. And the other thing is, believe me, it doesn't last forever. And so there becomes a point in time when someone is done. You're kind of sitting over there thinking, pick me, talk to me, right? Like, so that changes quick. So I think just for all the young, the young athletes and coaches of young teams and whatnot, another little way of looking at it, right? And I think that's important as well.
To that point, Pat, I will say, I think we're going to get into these questions about, favorite things and whatnot. One of my favorite people to interview in the game of curling is Chelsea Carey. And it is because I know that every single time I talk to Chelsea Carey, she is going to give it to me straight. And she's not going to mince her words. And so I know I'm armed with the knowledge that if I need a thought on something, Chelsea Carey is it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's what you would want to be known for as an athlete.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, so some questions for you. Want to know, because obviously, big part in the major sporting events, minor, everything, obviously, but specifically the last Olympics in Tokyo and the one before the last Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, greatest or coolest moment?
You know what it was? I mean, there are so many, but the thing that really stands out in Pyeongchang to me, actually, and this is going to really hit close to home, literally, Pat, is covering the wheelchair curling team and covering the journey of Marie Wright from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Because her story, her journey to get there, and the moment when she won the bronze medal and that smile and the joy it brought her, and the interview I did after with her, when she told me that she never believed that she would ever be on a podium in her entire life. And there she was on a podium on the largest athletic stage with her daughters in the crowd, who told me that it was their turn to celebrate their supermom, who was on the sidelines her entire life, and now their turn to show up, is a moment that I will never forget for the rest of my career. So the grandeur of the Olympics, of course, is spectacular. But that moment with Marie Wright and getting to know her really, really well, and just seeing what that meant to her and the power of sport for her and the power of motivating others and never giving up on your dreams despite impossible odds. I think it really captured the essence of why I do this. And is something that I'll carry with me for the rest of my career.
That's really cool. I obviously have the pleasure of getting to see lots of her not as much now that I'm not, there as much as I'm sure she still is, but yeah, unbelievable for sure. And I remember reading that, and that was cool for sure. How you covered that for sure. Favorite athlete to interview?
Yeah, that is such a tough one. And I've been thinking about this and thinking about this and thinking about this. How would I answer this? I would probably say, and I know people who know my coverage, I credit a lot of my success in covering curling to Guju's run in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I've really gotten to know him. And I just, the way he shows up for an interview and how he's evolved and really opened up. He's probably one of my favorite people to speak to, because it is always so thoughtful, and it is always so genuine, and it's a really, I would say it's a really healthy reporter, journalist relationship. And I really appreciate talking to him, not only about what's going on in the game, but also what's going on in his life. He provides great insight. So that's how I would answer that. I've been able to interview a lot of cool people though over the years. So yeah.
Awesome. So I'm gonna say funniest comment or funniest person that time and again you've spoken to.
You won't be surprised by this answer. Ben Hubert, over and over and over. I mean, when I'm covering an event and I know I need a little bit of drama and a little bit of a flair in my coverage and in my storytelling, it's Ben Hubert. And he's so good, for as off the handle as Benny can get sometimes. He's really clever at what he says in an interview. He really knows how to use the media, how to fire up his team in the media, how to give an interview in the media. When I covered that team in Pyeongchang, he gave the quote of the games and he looked at me and he said, "This is rock bottom. This is rock bottom for Canadian curling." And I appreciated him so much for that, because he said what we were all thinking. And for as fun-loving and all of those things as Ben was, I saw him in a completely different light in Pyeongchang. And I really appreciate that. He's funny. He's a jokester. We all know that about Ben, but he also has a lot of layers to him. And
Yeah. No, that's for sure. Cool. Yeah, I first knew Ben had a thing for the speaking and how he spoke and whatnot. He was asked to speak at kind of a Southern playdown that we had, and this was when he was extremely young. Of course, I think it was one of the first years I played with him. So he was fresh out of juniors, basically.
Right.
And so he spoke at the South Banquet in front of however many teams were there, 16 men's teams there, and it was unbelievable. And he had people rolling and fired up, and it just that was the first I had ever seen. And of course, everyone knows Ben, and he hasn't really changed since then, obviously. But yeah, no, it was something to behold, that's for sure. So
yeah.
Favorite curling club? Do you have a favorite curling club that you've been in?
Well,
arena or club.
Well, this is awesome. My favorite curling club is a home club that I won my 2 high school city championships, the Granite Curling Club, downtown Saskatoon.
Hey, nice.
And what I can share with everybody here is that, I'll share it. I don't care. We'll be breaking the news next week. Colleen and I are actually going to be doing that curling show live from the Granite Curling Club during the junior championships. Because it's important to us to highlight grassroots curling. It's important to us to highlight how much of the heartbeat of a community a curling club is. And so we're going to be live from the Granite Curling Club during the juniors every night at 6 p.m. in between the second and third draw of the Olympic trials. And we have shows jam-packed with guests. We're going to get in all aspects of curling. And so to return to the club that I won my high school city championships when the juniors are on, and do that curling show with Colleen Jones, it's going to be pretty special. So that's my answer to that. It's a pretty easy one, Pat.
I think they got sheet 2 ready for you guys, so that'll be great, and we will see you up there for sure as well. So awesome. Last one for you: hardest assignment or hardest interview that you've ever had to do?
I would say Tokyo. I would say 51 days in Tokyo in a pandemic, the only Canadian reporter doing the Olympics and Paralympics. It was extraordinary. The heat was stifling. The restrictions were even more suffocating. It was the most challenging assignment of my career. And yet it was the most rewarding in the sense that I wouldn't say across the lines of objectivity, maybe for the CBC style guy. But Pat, there was this onus on us to understand that we were literally the only Canadians our Canadian athletes were seen in their moment of glory and defeat. No fans, no friends, no family. And for as much as I'm a professional and as much as I want to stick to the journalist oath, I probably gave a few fist bumps and a few celebrations in medal moments and in heartbreak moments. So I was pressed. I was pressed in every way imaginable throughout my career in Tokyo.
Yeah, well, and we thank you for that. We all thank you for that. Obviously, yeah, just different circumstance altogether. And you saying it, I'm sure doesn't even come close to doing it justice. And with that, the extra pressure of, wanting to and feeling like you have to be there for everything. That's just the way it was for sure. So,
Yep.
job well done. So we know now that you're as good at answering the questions as you are asking them. So I had mentioned before that, feel free if you had anything for me that we'd switch back to our normal roles here, and I'm happy to give you that chair back for sure.
Sure. Now listen, of course, I was at the Settle Dome when you won in 2015, and what a day that was, and what a game that was, and what a celebration that was for you and your family. I haven't been able to find, and I don't think I asked you in all of that moment, Pat, did you know you were going to throw the broom when you made the shot?
No, totally unplanned. Didn't at all. I don't really know where that came from, to be honest. I think it was, I remember a lot about that shot. I remember kind of after I slid out, and the guys were kind of on it, kind of off it. And I really wanted them to see that they were sweeping it. Like that's what what I had hoped for. And that's kind of was the last thing I told myself kind of before I slid out of the hack for that.
Wow.
And so it's kind of going down the ice and they're kind of on it, but not, to the point where I knew it was in trouble or whatever. And, basically I think it was just that moment of exuberation, and the arm went that way, and the broom I decided I don't care. and thankfully I think it grazed off the bottom of the jumbotron, or it might have, I didn't want to hurt anyone, obviously, right? So but yeah, didn't, certainly not planned. That was just a culmination of years of grind, if you will, and just a tough week and a different week for us, and had gone through so much in the lead up to that, and even the year before with kind of the team change and the circumstance of all that. So no, that was just kind of pure emotion, and away it went.
And Pat, we could take that week and the journey that you were all on as a team is a great example of how you navigate the craziness that was, right? I mean, you were throwing so many things, and I think it was actually, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, a loss against Saskatchewan. I think it was after that game that you made the change, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for sure it was. Yeah. We lost. It would have been maybe Monday night, something like that. Anyway, it was fairly early in the week, and we had our third loss early in the week, which was way too many already. Exactly, it was. Yeah, ironically enough, it was against Saskatchewan, and we had two vehicles going there and from, because we didn't have, we had the smaller vehicles or whatever, and from my understanding, of course, I didn't at the time know anything about it, but John and Earl rode back and started discussing, what the heck are we going to do? Like, we can't carry on like this, right? So what's going to happen? And later that night got together in the room, and again, I had known nothing about this, and that's kind of when we laid it all out as a team, basically, right? And lots of other options were kind of given, as far as, do you want to throw last and I'll keep skipping, and this and that and the other. And I was, at that moment, I was proud of myself in a sense that I said, no, if I'm doing that, then I'm doing this. And that's just the way it's going to be. And that's out of personality for me, for sure. If you know me at all. It was a weird week. Like, I just kind of knew that, I'm willing to do this, but only under these circumstances. But the neatest part of that week, honestly, was, and it doesn't probably get told enough, is that we went out the next morning to play. And, I told the guys, I said, it's been, 4 or 5 years since I've skipped. Like, I'm going to have to literally think about, we don't have last rock, we're drawing to the middle. And it was that elementary for the first couple ends, basically. Right. And I mean, it comes back, obviously, but it was a little frightening. However, you would never know from the other 3 guys, you would never know that I hadn't been skipping that team for a decade. It was unbelievable. Like, it was, business just carried on. It was seamless. And I think it was seeing that and them letting me have entire reign and freedom. That was the difference, really, at the end of the day. And I mean, you got to play well and you got to throw good and all these other things, but that wouldn't have mattered had that not taken place in that sense, right? So,
an outstanding story. That's all I got. That's brilliant stuff. That was fun to witness. I was up in the press box right above, feeling as if I was right down on the sheet, and watching that. It was such a serene moment in the Saddle Dome that day. So that's all I got, Pat. It was incredible stuff to watch, and was so thrilled for you. So,
well, it was a neat story, and that's what sport's about, right? I mean, it's about, people being able to remember neat stories like that, and that's just one of a whole bunch, and again, a whole bunch that we get the joy of you covering and bringing to us, which is we're all appreciative of and thankful for sure. So, any questions? Anyone have any other questions at all? We kind of answered, I think, the one in the chat there. Anyone else have any other questions before we go?
We got curling. We got live curling coming.
You betcha. Yeah. Feel free to unmute if you have anything. If not, we'll just give you a second here. But if not, you've got some packing to do, I would assume. And when do you head out then?
So Colleen and I are catching a flight at 8:15 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be in Saskatoon at 10:30 a.m. and away we go. We have our preview that curling show on Friday night. Then we're going to take a bit of a break, just doing coverage of the event. We come back in full force with a full production crew, satellite truck, the whole bit. Wednesday till Sunday. So we'll be 6 p.m. local time, 7 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday to Saturday. And then on Championship Sunday, we're going to do a show in between the women's championship and the men's championship. That'll go at, I think we said 5 o'clock local, 6 p.m. Eastern. So we're working on getting a live feed of the show up in all the TVs in the bar at the Granite. So we're encouraging people to come, because Colleen and I will be there, and I have a suitcase full of CBC swag to give away to people who show up. So it'll be COVID friendly. Trust me, we've done all the risk assessments, and I'm just so happy to be heading home for this. And it's going to be an extraordinary event. So I'm just looking forward to being in an arena with fans at a big curling event once again.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no. Well, we're excited to have you guys. Obviously, Granite's going to put on a great event. The trials is going to be fantastic. It's going to be good stuff for sure. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. Great stuff. Great information. Appreciate all you do. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And just again, thanks everyone for joining. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be listening to this, and so just big thanks, and we'll see you up there next week.
Grateful for you, Pat, and everybody who was here. And let's let the rocks fly.
You betcha. Awesome. Take care, you guys. Have a good night.